You can go on.
All right. Welcome to this special webinar presented by Dainik Bhaskar Group in association with e4mWebinar. Over the next few weeks, we will be bringing you some curated series of webinars, and the topic would be non-metros driving the economic resurgence. The idea is to focus on the tier 2 and tier 3 clients, and the consumers in India who are now leading, who have now come to the center stage of consumption across India. Today's webinar, before I come to that topic, let me just give an overview as what has been happening in the last 100+ days. Now we are in a recovery phase. There are green shoots of recovery everywhere. And that's largely driven by non-metro consumers. Very strangely, I mean, if you see, it was a different world order as far as consumption is concerned, and which has totally shifted. COVID has perennially shifted the way we look at brands, the way we look at consumers. So we'll get into the depth of this conversation today. The topic for today is non-metros, the road to recovery for the Indian economy. And the focus of the webinar will be on how brands must strengthen the consumer connect in non-metros to accelerate recovery and growth. Before I go further, I want to introduce my esteemed panelists. I have with me Mr. Satish NS, Senior Vice President, Higher Appliances India Private Limited. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thanks, Amin. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I have with me, sorry, 1 minute. Okay. I have with me Mr. Sudhakar Rao, Director Branding, ICFAI Group. Welcome, sir. Mr. Vipul Oberoi, CMO, IIFL Finance and IIFL Securities. Welcome, Mr. Oberoi. And Ms. Kaacon Sethi, CMO, Dainik Bhaskar Group. Welcome all of you to this special webinar wherein the focus is on the consumer sentiment in non-metro cities. Before I move further, I want to just understand, I think we all have been in a different world order over the last 100 days. So a little bit of story of how you have been personally dealing with the personal and professional front as far as COVID is concerned, and how are you balancing the two? Maybe a 1 minute answer from all of you. I can start, maybe anyone can start, there's no order in that. Yes, Mr. Satish, maybe you can start.
Okay. The last probably 80 days or 100 days, the question was, how are you differentiate between a personal life and a professional life? I think there's no line. It's mixed now. Both personal and professional life, both are mixed. And probably in a webinar like this, in my general days, I would not have been, coming on a T-shirt like this. So that thin line is wherein, the formal, this one, I think there's a very little difference between a professional and a personal life now.
So the lines are blurring.
Yeah.
Mr. Rao, your thoughts?
Yeah, in the last 100 days, I would divide that into two parts. So the first part of 50 days, I was busy on the roads, working along with my co-alumni to distribute ration for the needy folks, especially those so-called migrant workers. And we reached out to about 21,000 individuals and managed to put about 15 days of food on the table. So that's what we did as a voluntary activity from all my friends who studied along with me. So that was the first 50 days. And the second 50 days, I was coming to office because we need to work towards these green shoots. Therefore, we were coming to office and interacting with all my colleagues and trying to ensure that online education is in place and try and coordinate that it is taken forward in the right spirit. So that's roughly between professional and personal in the last 100 days.
Mr. Oberoi.
Yeah, so in this lockdown, actually, our lives have been, Satish said, blurred. But if I say there is a stark contrast also, if I look at my screen, laptop or mobile, there's still a flurry of emails, work being done, and in fact, everybody was working from home and possibly working much more than before. But when I look outside, leave my office, the world has changed drastically. It's very different from what we are seeing on screens. because of lockdown, we haven't still yet come back. And I said out of Mumbai, so life hasn't yet come back to normal. There are still empty roads, which in Mumbai you would prefer to have that. But on the whole, when you see businesses closed, from our side, all the marketing channels, most of these are non-existent right now. So it's a big contrast which I experience.
Ms. Sethi, finally, your thoughts.
Yeah, in fact, just as a couple of us here mentioned, lines are blurred as far as working is concerned. I also.
Sorry, so we lost the connection, I guess.
Yeah.
I think that's okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
It's a bit. It's a change.
Right. I think there's some problem with the connection.
Problem with my connection.
It was slightly like we
Okay.
in between, yes, briefly.
Yeah, it's been a little weird since morning. So my son is currently appearing for his first online exam, so that's kind of new.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a.
Right.
I think it's just the level, it's the amount of work which has gone up,
Right.
And it's all interconnected nowadays. So it's.
Absolutely. So I think the sense is that, of course, I think life has changed and changed for maybe the better, of course, maybe this becomes a long run, format, the way lives will be run hereafter.
But one of the good things I just wanted to add is that, during this 100 days or so, the level of interaction that me and my colleagues have had with our, clients and advertisers,
right,
at large has gone through the roof. I've never interacted so much with people, and I think that has been the high point of the last years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people do actually highlight this point that while we have been socially distanced, but there has been a certain connect, which was never before. Great. So before, I want to move directly to my first question for the day, which is, we have seen how consumers are, the metros and the non-metros markets are shaping up, and we have come to find out, and so have a lot of research that has been done over the last few weeks, that non-metros, the consumers, they have come out as stronger, as resilient, consumers. So my first question is that what makes non-metros so resilient to this this drastic change that has happened, this phenomenal thing that has kind of vanished and closed businesses across and brought down this consumer sentiment, but yet non-metros are not that affected. So I want to come to you first, Mr. Oberoi. What is your thought? What is the reason that we see this pattern?
Thanks. I would like to actually first try to separate the wheat from the chaff. Is that the economy slowed down really not because of COVID, but because of lockdown. So I'm not getting into the reasons why lockdown was done. It was, of course, essential. And maybe I'm putting it too simplistically. But because of lockdown, consumers weren't spending as much. Businesses saw a slowdown in production or requirement of staff for certain services, or had to stop their business altogether, which resulted in layoffs, pay cuts. And ultimately, these were the consumers who were not spending as much. It's a vicious circle. But it all started with lockdown. Now, why I'm bringing this point also is that the major cities saw a stricter implementation of lockdown by authorities and more disciplined following of rules as well by the citizens, which hasn't been the case in non-metros. Now, businesses continue to operate in most places, so there was a continuity in production and consumption of goods and services. Now, metros are hub of services. They have non-farm output. Rural areas are hubs of agriculture, which obviously cannot be paused, should not be paused. Non-metros, if I see the tier 2, tier 3 cities, are a mix of both. But in my opinion, they just happen to be along the Silk Route. But continuity, I feel, is the major reason why non-metros have been more buoyant and resilient to this.
Right. Mr. Santosh, I want to come to you. I mean, do you agree? Do you think the fact that lockdown was more visible in metros that led to the sentiment that we're witnessing today, that resurgence in non-metros, is that the reason?
If you ask me, see the impact of the lockdown or this one, in the non-metros was quite low. Second is the overall economy impact on metro was it was least there. And third is probably the customers there, because of all this digital awareness which is coming in, they still continue to spend the money which they were having. And that's probably the reason where the non-metros are probably performing better than. And the other factor is the dependency on the private sector or any of the other businesses in the non-metros were quite low when we compare to a city. Like, for example, in city, the number of private organizations which were impacted or this one were quite high. Whereas in a up-country market or a non-metro, it was more of a government services which were there. The dependency on the private sector is quite low. I think the government sector never impacted in terms of their salary or any of those things. So that, I think, was one of the primary reasons where the non-metros are still continuing to perform better.
Sethi, I want to come to you since you understand the dynamics of the markets which are non-metro, since you have a great presence across India. I want to understand from you the sentiment, the reason for this resurgence, the buy-in sentiment that is in the non-metros. How do you read it?
Is the question to me or to Sudhakar?
Yes. To you first.
Me.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Well, I think there is actually first I believe that this paradigm shift kind of thing that is being talked about is now more pronounced. It has always been there. The fact that non-metros are performing better than metros, apart from the unfortunate fact that there has been a lockdown and metros are impacted more and so on and so forth. The nuance of the non-metros is very different from the metros. Their fabric, their social fabric, the way they're constructed, they're all flat. They're not high rises where, if you have a COVID situation in one high rise, you get locked out. Or those kind of situations are not happening. That's number one. Number two, wherever there are societies, those are very small societies. We are seeing this because we are delivering, to these societies. So we know what's happening on the ground, and we've seen that from very close quarters now. The other thing is that as markets or as people, they are very social. Their sociability is a very important part of the non-metro life. So that's why one of the things that we have seen is their ability to, while do safety to an extent, but continue to, be sociable. As far as, while there was a lockdown, as panelists said, that it wasn't as serious as it was, but there was a lockdown. For example, we in terms of our business, we saw that a complete shutdown for of about ground and almost became non-shutdown. So that I feel that it's a cultural thing, which is why the fact that they are less impacted. That's number one. And number two is the kind of, for example, you and I work in corporate offices, so we are shut down. These are more business oriented, business, trade. These are also, government. A large proportion of the population has their own, they have their own means of earning. So therefore, they are able to decide whether they should work or not work, rather than being, in a situation that we are in.
Right. I think you brought in brilliantly this cultural perspective, I think very validly. I think we sometimes miss that in our conversations. Mr. Rao, I want to come to you, somebody who brings in both metro and non-metro perspectives. Again, how do you read this change of consumer sentiment, changing from the metro and being shifted to the non-metro, the drivers of growth being in non-metros? How do you read it? Was it expected, or is it not that simple as we see it? Sorry, your audio is muted here.
When this pandemic hit, as you know, and agree that it doesn't come with any advance notice. So the question of expecting it this way is not non-existent. But on the other hand, I think the one overriding factor has been this lockdown and its fears as portrayed in the mainstream media. And metro folks are supposed to be taking it more seriously, and those names were actually being thrown up in media more often compared to non-metros. Here again, some of the essential services in non-metros were not affected. Their consumption patterns more or less remained the same, but the demand is low. Generally, the demand which is actually fueled by the metros, and that has affected definitely the non-metros as well. Now, low demand and ancillary production and the related services, everything is affected. I fundamentally want to differentiate between metros, non-metros, and within non-metros, rural and non-rural. I think that's a very important aspect. We'll come to that in the second round. I will speak about that after some time. But primarily today, if you touched about my own organization, ICFAI is into higher education. As you know, we have about 11 ICFAI universities across the country. And they're present in metros and non-metros as well. For example, we are present in Hyderabad, Jaipur, Himachal Pradesh, Dehradun, Ranchi, Raipur, and then we are in Sikkim, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, Tripura. So the spread is of these universities is more in non-metros, whereas our business schools, which are 9 in number, they are in bigger cities. So the definition of metros we will try to close in now, saying ICFAI business schools are in Hyderabad, Bangalore, Mumbai, Pune, Ahmedabad, Kolkata, Gurgaon, Jaipur. So these are the 9 cities where we are present. So business schools are in bigger cities, universities are in which are non-metros. Right from the beginning, our focus has been to take quality education to the doorstep of larger pockets of this country. So by structure and by intent, we have been present like that. And this lockdown or this COVID will not affect too much as far as our education business is concerned. This is an annual purchase for them, unlike those essentials which they purchase every week and every month. This is an annual purchase, and this is the first sector to recover, although this is the last one to open. Whenever the campuses are permitted to open, it will open. But one important overriding factor in education would be the mobility of students from one city to another city will not happen this year, particularly at least. For example, the student who is studying in, say, Jaipur would not like to move to Hyderabad, and somebody in Gwalior would not like to move to, say, Mumbai. So the students will have to be caught, which means the catchment area will have to be in those respective towns itself. And ICFAI is present in all these towns by structure right from the beginning. Say, last 12 years, we've been present in almost all these locations. Therefore, our catchment areas are more defined, and we would like to expect those students studying there itself. In fact, our enrollment numbers could be much more than the last year, given the fact that a large number of them will not migrate to nearby bigger cities because we are the best option in all these places wherever we are present.
I think you brought out some positive stories, which I think have not been touched upon maybe in a lot of conversations earlier. But yes, very well said. I want to come to you, Mr. Satish. So there are, the lines are redrawn, the consumer, the way we look at consumers is totally, redrawn. The behavior has shifted, and it might be a permanent shift altogether. Do you think the way we are looking at customers, and overall, and right now this question is like the overall sentiment of customers. Do you think there's a permanent behavioral shift that is here to stay, or is it a pattern that will alter maybe in the course of time as we go along? How do you see the shift in behavior?
See, in the behavior, when we see, I can probably classify this behavior into probably 2-3 areas. The first one is probably some changes which will happen permanently. Okay, like for example, the habits which are changing is like we could never imagine schools being online. That's definitely, I mean, those are the habits which will change. Somebody doing household chores, those things, not allowing a servant to come in. Okay, I think these are the habits which will change drastically. And there are certain fundamental changes which are getting accelerated. For example, the search for information. Earlier, people used to go around in the shopping areas and then search for that information. Today, probably the digitization is the thing which is happening. So people would do more of a digital search to get that information. And probably the shopping, probably the online is here to stay, at least for the smaller items and the smaller ticket size. That adaptation which was there, like if you remember the demonetization period, when people who could not even spell probably the Paytm were forced. I think probably the COVID has brought in that digital revolution, and then probably that has changed. There are certain habits which are forced, like for example, probably in this last 100 days, people have washed their hands more than probably their lifetime. This probably, once the COVID fear goes out, probably these things, okay, anyway. And then probably social distancing today, okay, you're forced to live at home. So these are all temporary habits, which probably once the COVID goes off, then people again will go back to shopping mall, people will go back to their friends and then, have a party and this one. So I think these are the consumer behavioral changes which I see happening.
Right. I think once these behaviors are formed, to undo them is another task altogether. I think you're so right. Mr. Oberoi, your thoughts on this changed consumer that we call, that normally in our conversations we say consumer has changed. Has he changed forever, he or she, or is it reversible? Can be undone later on?
In fact, Satish rightly is pointed out to two things. One is temporary habits and then second is permanent. And this demonetization, if you see, was also a watershed moment because it gave a huge fill-up to the digital payments in India. So, but right now, when we talk about lockdown, I think a lot has been said about the acceleration of digital consumption. But I would like to talk more about the digital conversation. And that is a consumer behavior change, which I would like to talk about. Because of social distancing, mainly for the past 4 months or so, people are getting more used to, may not be happy, but they're getting more used to face-to-face, but non-personal meetings. And webinars is one example of that. Yes. So you can just Google the term meetings and you'll understand what I'm trying to say, the results that pop up. But yes, demonetization made businesses think, do we need customer to pay cash? Now, lockdown has made businesses and even consumers think, do we need personal interaction? While our brick and mortar businesses, our branches will not go anywhere, walk-ins will reduce because people will prefer interacting online first. And when I say online, let me clarify, is online for me is any non-personal chat. So it can be web, email, chat app, or even a phone call. But what we will see is that like work from home is becoming the norm and people have got used to it. And many people do feel that going back to office and working regularly, coming every day to office will become a bit difficult. It may so happen for a large set of consumers, even in non-metros. So purchase and interactions from home will also become the norm. Only a word of caution, this does not apply to rural areas. I'm talking about non-metros.
Right. Mr. Rao, from your perspective, the category you are in, you briefly touched upon how students who are back in their homes right now would not like to come back. You briefly touched upon it, but how do you read this shift in sentiment in your category especially?
In education, what happened even earlier before COVID was that for closures, they used to visit the campus and talk to some faculty members, look at the labs, playgrounds and things like that, and then they would close. But a large part of their decision or the behavior of decision making was almost taken or made much before visiting the campuses based on the online stories that were available, which we were carefully managing to have. For example, students are encouraged to share their views about the campus. They are free to talk about their own experiences, which will be a lesson for the prospective students to look at. And therefore, that way, they have always been in touch. For example, the student who is living in some parts of West Bengal knows exactly which program in ICFAI University Dehradun is doing well. I will advertise all the programs are doing extremely well, but the student knows the same set of students who come to Dehradun will come for a particular program and not for another program.
Right.
All this was always possible because of the conversations that they were having in various discussion groups on social media, and you cannot hide those facts. So essentially what it means for me is that it has not changed much. And those of you, those students who will come and check the university can see the infrastructure now virtually. All the virtual reality films are available, augmented reality pictures are available. All those things will help them take a decision. But largely the decision would have been made already by the sum and substance of the experience shared by the previous
Right.
students. And there's a market, there's a word of mouth in the market that's existing largely, and it would be guiding and governing their decision making process.
Great. Ms. Sethi, somewhere I think all the marketing leaders, like all of you out there, I think COVID is also a certain kind of lab experiment to understand consumers and maybe understand the nuances of how they would behave in the longer run. As we saw that webinars and going online has become a norm. What has been your reading of the change customer, one from your industry perspective and overall as a marketing leader, thought leader? What do you say? How has it shaped up, in the last few months?
Sure. And one of the things that I'd like to refer to is something I got hold of very recently, which is gave me a lot of information. Of course, there is the first-hand.
Sorry, you're
all non-metro for us.
It's briefly disconnecting, but
can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you. Now we can hear you.
Sorry, there is a bit of a disturbance. Okay.
Yes, that's fine.
All right. I'd like to, talk to you about the recent Ernst & Young report, which came out, I think a week or 10 days back or something.
Right.
Which basically, and I read that report, and it was very interesting because what it said was that I actually wanted to spend a couple of minutes on that. One is that you talked about, how non-metros were resilient, and we discussed why they were
right.
better than metros, and why this trend could be there to stay, and so on and so forth. Some of the data that is supporting this discussion is that across, I think they've looked at some, almost 15, 16 categories. And across categories, it seems to be so that, let us say, buy mobiles or buy auto, to be more in the non-metros, and that seemed to be like a real eye-opener for me, at least, where it's important to see that report that across categories there seems to be a larger intention to buy, which is why this whole feeling of, or this whole belief that these markets are more resilient than than metros at this point in time. They will continue to be more resilient for some of the reasons that all of us gave here. The fact that, they are probably the fact that I said that, socially they're different, or the fact that they were not as impacted, that their occupations are different, that they are more business oriented, so they are running their own. Of course, demand, to say that demand is not down would be like, that would be a really stupid statement. But of course, demand is down. But the fact is that resilience seems to be, that report said to me that, that resilience is what these markets were showing. So that seemed to be a point that I thought I'd bring up in view of, or in favor of non-metros, so to speak. I also wanted to touch upon one of the things that Satish mentioned, and again, this is first-hand experience because we are talking to our customers, our readers, our our franchise who are on our digital avatars and on our radio stations. So we actually talk to them practically every day through a large speaking mechanism. And a recent dipstick that we did, which was particularly in the category of how people are behaving when they are going to shop. So here, as Satish said, that they are doing a lot of understanding, research. In fact, I saw in the EY report was that they are actually metros are more they have adopted digitization and all kinds of work that they're doing through that, but non-metros are lagging behind. And some of the things that the non-metro respondents have said that there is they are probably there is less the connectivity is lower. All of the languages that they want is not available. Sometimes they're a little scared of frauds and e-payments and so on and so forth. So some of those factors have been mentioned. But pertaining to this dipstick that I'm talking about, which we did in a large size across several markets, where we found that people who were going shopping, particularly for white goods, they were going with a clear picture in their mind that this was the brand that I'm going to buy. This is the price of the brand, and I will go and pick that up. I'm not going to go to, because it is COVID, they are not the shop that they trust the most. They're going there, they're picking it up, and they're coming back home. So they're shopping. They're actually physically. Is probably from various mediums.
Right.
From what we were expecting, I think all of us are making our Amazon sale, lists that we want to currently, and we would probably indulge in that. But there, people are actually going out to shop.
Right. Absolutely. I think brilliantly put up. Even I read that report, and these are, and as you mentioned, I think sentiment is important. The sentiment of resilience is important. I think the markets will bounce back once the sentiment is there. I want to come to you, Mr. Rao, with my next question. I want to begin with you. That now we talk about the resurgence, the coming back, the green shoots. But the larger question is that, are there any specific categories that will be the drivers of this green shoots that are emerging? Initially, that would take off, help the market sentiment go up. Are there any categories specifically that would be driving it in your view?
Is this to me?
Yes.
See, my response will be in two areas. One is related to education, and the other one in general. The first one about education is that the online education that is currently going on, in our attempt to connect to a large number of students across the country, education institutions have not reached beyond 50% of the population, which means there are 37 crore students studying from KG to PG and research level across the country. All the time, 37 crore students are studying. Out of this, at best, institutions have reached out to them online 50%. So a large population, another 50% is yet to be touched, for more importantly, 4 reasons. One, lack of devices, either smartphones or tabs. Second, internet connectivity. Third one is the bandwidth. Even if you have internet connectivity, that does not ensure bandwidth. And the fourth one is electricity. Now, all these 4 factors are not uniformly present in the remaining 50% of the population locations, but in different pockets, some of the factors are dominant, but then it's an interplay of all the 4. So it's not working the way we want it. Now, this will only be possible if the government is on mission mode. I said this earlier and I'm saying it again, that if the government is on mission mode and rapid build infrastructure, probably we could reach, say, 70% or 75% from where we are at present, 50%. Having said that, I come to the general discussion of the e4mWebinar report. I'm not a great fan of E&Y report. I read this. It's a July 2020 report. It's the latest one. For a very important reason that I want to live like an optimist and die like a pessimist and not the reverse. See, currently what's happening is the rural sector or the non-metro is just not the rural. Non-metro is basically tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and some of the tier 3 and tier 4 is also rural. So therefore, let me talk about rural itself. Now, rural economy has got agriculture economy and non-agriculture economy. You know that agriculture economy is about, you have farming, and then non-farming is about construction, livestock rearing, and so on and so forth. So all this put together is the rural economy. I don't see that there are any credible reasons why the rural economy is going to help fuel the overall Indian economy. I don't see that actually. Even otherwise, also the rural economy was only about 1/7 of our economy or 1/8 of our economy. Therefore, I don't see structurally why that should be helping the overall economy in coming back to normalcy. You will have these islands of boost on a comparative mode, saying that non-metro is doing well. I agree to that extent, but is it going to be permanently like that? I'm sure it is not. COVID is reaching non-metros and even rural areas now. So the hitherto factors that probably gave a semblance of resilience are now not going to exist. Therefore, we need to have those things once again checked. E&Y should present another report by end of August or middle of August. That would be the realistic picture. As we move forward, the number of COVID cases are going to rise. The state governments are going to lose their control. Their medical facilities and infrastructure has already busted, and it is going to go worse. The state revenue collections are coming down more because of no access and no activities happening in various parts of the state. Their collections have come down drastically. So their own ability to service everyone will be very, very poor, especially at a time when their priority is COVID.
Right.
So these are large number of issues which are there.
Perfect.
I think it is misunderstood. I'm comparing this E&Y report to what Vivek Kaul has been writing about in various pieces and where he has been talking about. Vivek Kaul, a good friend, he wrote that Bad Money. He says that people have actually not understood the rural economy or the agriculture economy. It is actually very, very small. And some of the instances taken by, for example, the tractor sales and motorbike sales have gone up. So motorbike sales and tractor sales are very, very small part of the whole thing in rural areas. For example, last fiscal 2019 and 20, the tractor sales, each tractor on average cost about 5 lakhs of rupees. So if 7 lakh tractors have been sold, then it was only 35,000 crores.
Right.
Whereas it again works out to about 1/8 of the whole thing. So we can't go by those factors.
No, I totally agree with you. I think you have brought in a sentiment which is there. I think there is a scope of course, I think how the COVID scenario will shape up, and henceforth. I think that is another conversation. I do totally agree with you, your point of view. But at the moment, I mean, what is before us, what is before us? I want to come to you, Mr. Oberoi, If we look at the picture that is right now before us, and what the picture is coming is, of course, something that we can look at later on. Basis the data that we have so far, in your view, what would be the categories that would be driving that growth, the sentiment of the market sentiment back, in your view?
Of course, I have a contrarian view, and I believe that agriculture is, of course, critical to the economy. How much contribution it makes, of course, it's not the only, it's not a major contributor, yes, from a numbers perspective, but of course, it has an overall cascading effect on the other aspects of the economy, including what Satish would also talk probably about, the white goods sales here. So the cascading effect is also important. And when we started this webinar, I spoke about the vicious circle, which has to be really broken. Second, I feel is the MSMEs, because they generate employment, And the more we support the MSMEs, and it all depends on the government support right now. So they would not really bounce back organically like a phoenix. Support has to be provided. Third, I believe, is telecommunications. And I feel that telecommunication essentially was always communications. And I'm not talking about just phone calls happening. Data is critical, which Mr. Sudhakar also mentioned for his students and because schools and campuses will be the last ones to get open. In fact, communications is important for everybody's business, including mine. So low cost of data is critical because in our business, which is a more branch-driven business, an NBFC business, we have seen a drastic surge in the adoption of digital payments. And that we have seen in the past 1 year or so. And that is possible only if we have good, reliable data connectivity. So telecommunications is critical. Whether they can bounce back or not, it's entirely up to the government right now.
Right. Ms. Sethi, I want to come to you. My next question is to you. Since the interface that you have with brands is different. I mean, there's a cross section of brands that you interact with. And what has been your understanding of the categories that are ready to? Can you hear me? Sorry. Am I audible? Yeah.
Yeah, it's breaking in between,
okay.
But it's okay.
All right.
Tell me.
All right. So I want to understand from you the categories, according to you, that would be driving this growth, since you have, as I said, interacted with a whole lot of the brands across.
Can you hear me?
We can. It's slightly, I mean, in between it gets disconnected for a second. Yeah, but
then for a second it drops and I'm like a little confused then.
Right.
Well, I can only go by data. What the data tells me is that there seems to be, good amount of volume in a certain number of categories. Auto, for one, is one of those categories. There is education, which is the other category, which is there is good amount of volume in the non-metro markets that we can see here. There's FMCG. There are, and one of the things that we've seen, it's an interesting situation that local FMCG brands have given corporate FMCG brands and run for their money also, because they have seized the moment. For example, Amul. If you see the story there, Amul seized the moment and continued to advertise at a point in time when everybody was quiet and wondering what to do. It reaped the benefits of that, of that quick thinking and taking advantage of the fact that everybody else was quiet and they wanted to make their brand more salient. So there are several large categories which are extremely promising. One of the we are also seeing some amount of movement in the non-metro markets from FMCDs, which is in Satish's categories. So these are some of the larger categories that we see volume in. Importantly, if I were to talk about my business in the sense that the business that we're in terms of media, a couple of things have happened. Unlike, which is really a different, this whole metro versus non-metro situation that we are seeing, we are discussing actually. In the metros, we've seen that over the last just about a week, 10 days back, I started receiving my newspaper. But if you look at non-metro markets, and I'm talking all regional markets here, not Dainik Bhaskar alone. This is all regional markets, all whether Kerala to Gujarat and so on and so forth. All regional publications went back into recovery mode of this, because for 7 days, everything got shut down. So after 7 days, the recovery was extremely rapid to the extent the recovery of a newspaper is close to 90%. In our markets, it's about 82%. We are a public limited company. We have to file our, Pricewaterhouse is our, it audits us. We have to file our returns on SEBI. Our quarter is coming up next week. So we will be filing. I know for a fact that we are at 82% recovery of of circulation. So the because the state government's help, the sanitization and everything that needed to be done was done really rapidly. I would give a lot of credit to publishers here because I think they understood that they cannot live without, I mean, they should not allow this habit to be broken.
Right.
And that quick thinking allowed the recovery of circulations to happen very fast. We also, for example, in our case, if I look at it, we're delivering about 75 million MUV on. You know, the fact is that, and we've seen a clear pattern when we look at our portfolio. We see the morning newspaper being read. We know that, again, I'm going back to a report which has been discussed before, which said that, you know, the trust index as far as newspapers is concerned is very high. I don't for a minute doubt that, because we've seen that in our markets. We're also talking to other publishers, and we feel that the written word, particularly in these markets, the written word is taken very seriously. And more importantly, the other number that really, kind of surprised me was that online people tended to believe online news more than they believe TV news. I would assume, no, that's there's a reason for that, because in the non-metros, they physical newspapers. That's why the trust index is quite high as far as online is concerned. So these are some of the categories which are moving in the like I said, if I compare July last year versus this year, I'm sure that we're far away from what numbers, but there are volumes which are speaking of a good. I wouldn't say great, but definitely a recovery which is being seen. There is promise there, so can't shy away from that situation.
Perfect, Mrs. Satish. You have heard all of them, and now I want to get your perspective on this, the drivers of the green shoots, the resurgence, and in your category also. Give me a perspective, a sense of how your category is placed in this revival that we call it, the green shoots. Where do you see the role of your category, plus the overall, the drivers that would be there as far as other brands are concerned?
Luckily for us, I think probably after the grocery industry, we were the fastest to recover. Okay, because the average time spent by an individual at home has gone up. Okay, so what will drive this category, or what are the things which will drive the categories which will address the hygiene part, the categories which will address the convenience part? I think probably those categories would grow much, much faster. Giving our own examples, probably the larger refrigerators, which is costing about 65,000-70,000. Trust me, we ran out of inventory last month. Okay, the people are storing more, and people are looking at larger refrigerators. Same is the case probably earlier. Now, most of the people are spending time at home, and they have most of the men getting into washing. So earlier the maid was doing, so semi-automatic machine was there. Now they're upgrading to a fully automatic machine. Earlier the maid was doing the cleaning. Now the dishwashers people want to buy, and people want to buy all this UV product. And the best part is, since the time spent is more, the living room has become the new entertainment center. So we are seeing a huge surge in our large screen televisions which are happening. So it's a huge, I mean, across the category, whether it is metro or non-metro, the large screen televisions have gone up. So overall, if you look at the categories, whether in our industry or any other industry, the categories which will address anything related to hygiene, anything related to convenience, I think probably those are the industries which would definitely grow much, much, much faster than what current space speed is.
I want to make a small announcement that we have another 10-15 minutes left, and we are already getting some questions, and I want to request my viewers that you have any questions, please post on Facebook, Twitter, on Zoom, and we will definitely ask those questions. I want to come to you, Mr. Satish, with my next question. I want to start with you, is that in all of the categories, there is a missing, the physical touch points have come down and completely not been seen there for some time. And the touch points have shifted to digital. And one is that, can we recreate the physical, the experience digitally, and how are brands thinking strategically in a long-term way to adjust to this digital touch points that are emerging right now?
Ask me that question.
Yes, yes.
You can. This is my answer to you. My beard is what I can say. The last 100 days has been a nightmare to us. Trust me, ours is an industry where people would want to touch and feel a refrigerator, see the color of the refrigerator, would like to see a washing machine. How does it look? What does it function? Would like to touch and feel a microwave, okay, when you're opening a door, and see how it would work. Now, here is a challenge for us. In the last 100 days, the first and foremost, the pre-purchase completely changed. The customer, the way he was going to a shop floor. Earlier, they used to go to the shop floors, talk to the salesperson, understand from him what does he want, and this one, come back home, discuss with their friends and colleagues, and then they were buying it. Now, that completely stopped. Second, during the purchase now, people earlier would prefer to go to a larger outlet or some store which is in a mall or something. People started buying locally. We suddenly saw a resurgence in the smaller outlets, in the distribution channel. People said, boss, even if it was 500 rupees expensive, let me go buy from my neighborhood store. Why take a risk of getting into something? One is, okay, lockdown. Second is, so we saw a resurgence. So the purchase pattern changed. The third important challenge was the post-purchase. Earlier, if you buy a refrigerator or if you buy a LED television, our engineer used to come to your houses, customer houses, set it up to his requirement, and then come out of it. Now, all the three parameters completely changed. Pre-purchase, okay, we have to make everything digital. From people who are, our industry is almost, I would say, varying from brand to brand, probably between 90 to 93% is from offline, and about 10 to 7% is from online businesses. Now, this 93% people, we were depending completely on everything physical catalog, physical product demonstration. Now, in quick succession of 30 days, you have to shift from physical to digital. So you have to make everything. So clean your websites, get your blogs cleared, get the videos done, everything, how effectively you will put your product videos and everything to them. Second, we have to get our distribution channel right. Okay, if the customer is going to neighborhood store, are we present there? How do you change that thing? Then in terms of advertisement, if we have to advertise, very good. There was no live activity happening. None of the soap operas were working. They were only broadcasting the repeat channels. There's no outdoor. There's no print, especially in the metros. You don't have a print to do it. So what is the only means? Get into digital. In digital, okay, there's a whole list. Would you get into Facebook? Okay, if you have to get into Facebook, will you use a static? Will you use a video? There's a huge change which we have to do in terms of our entire marketing approach had to change. Now, the post-purchase, it's a nightmare. Means, as a consumer, I bought a product which is about 50,000 and it has come to my house delivery. I need to start it right now. So how do you, without an engineer being there? Now, even if you upload unboxing videos, the problem, each customer will have a different perception. Do I switch on this refrigerator right now, or what do I store? Then finally, we had to reinvent the wheel, wherein we made people to call on video. Our service engineers would take the call on video. Okay, madam or sir, please show me where is the problem. Okay, this is okay. This is how you switch on. This is how you set up the refrigerator. This is the temperature. Okay, there is a knob there in the right corner. Okay, do that one. So, those are the complete adaptation. If you ask me what we were in March, if somebody had told that, okay, Satish, there would be a day coming in wherein you have to demonstrate how unboxing has to be done on video, probably in March, none of us would have believed it. But here is the time now. Most of our demonstration, especially the large, the high ticket sizes, we do a demonstration on video. So customers don't want them to. So it's a completely different change which happened in terms of adaptation.
Right. And that also explains the story behind the beard. I can now understand. Thank you. Yes.
Oh, brilliant.
Perfect. Mr. Rao, yes, I mean, so brilliantly, I think, said. Mr. Rao, your take on this digital, the missing physical touch points and completely digital. Tell me the story in your category.
In education, what is happening is the enrollment process has become online. It has been automated. The industry has been moving in this direction over the last 3 to 4 years. But COVID and pandemic and lockdowns have uh, compelled us to adapt to a situation which anyways we would have adapted after say 4 years or so. So the industry on the whole have taken online very seriously because that is the only way to connect to the prospective students and the other stakeholders. The admission process is online, the counseling is online, the visits are being worked out online, the selection process has become online. I would like to tell you that a large part of our selections in our undergrad programs is already done, and we have been able to identify the students through online interviews and selected the students and given the admission letters as well. I'm sure many other institutions are also doing the same. So yes, the touch points have become very different, but slowly and steadily the industry was moving towards chat conversations, mentoring, handholding, and the experience of online admission fairs has been prevalent for some time, but it's just catapulted into a all-pervasive feature in the last 3 to 4 months. I think it is working, but in the second round of the question, I would like to answer what is going to happen in the future and how it's going to evolve. But as of now, yes, touch points have changed and industry has adapted beautifully.
Right. Mr. Oberoi, how are you navigating the shift? How are you coming to terms with this new world, marketing world order, I may call it?
So, in fact, talking about our line of business, which is I manage marketing for both an NBFC and securities business. That's a broking business, and broking business has seen volumes which have never been seen before. So we have seen a huge multi-x jump in transactions. But when it comes to NBFC business, and our primary businesses are gold loan, home loan, business loan, and you can imagine what the situation would be. For example, gold loan, people take it for say their occupational requirements or for spending on some luxuries of the family or for emergencies. And if you see that apart from emergencies, people are not really spending, they are postponing their purchases. So it was always a difficult time for us, but thankfully at IIFL we were ahead of the curve as far as investment in digital was concerned. But I can say with facts that our loan payments through our mobile app, through our web portal has increased drastically. And we recently launched a digital gold loan for top-ups, which has become amazingly popular. So people are adopting these digital platforms. It's only that the brands have to be ready. We have seen, in fact, we do a lot of hyper-local targeting on digital platforms, and we have, in fact, got more leads through hyper-local searches in these 4 months than we got in the previous 6 months before the lockdown. Now, it's a testament to the kind of digital adoption which even non-metros have been doing.
Right.
So it's not been tough for us from a marketing perspective because it's something which was always on the anvil, and one needs to be prepared for it.
Right. Ms. Sethi, so this category, from your perspective, I think people miss the newspaper in their hands, and till they got it, I think there's a certain. So there's a different story from your perspective. And tell me, what is that story? How are people navigating this space? While we'll see digital is there, but even that report, which I also read, that the credibility factor, unless you have the touch and feel of the paper, you really can't trust.
No, I don't think it's just a touch and feel situation. I think it's a question of, the pull of the brand that you've grown up with, and really,
exactly.
Ask this entire, if they would ever be in a situation when they don't have their brand available to their customer for a long period of time. I don't think anybody can actually afford to be in that situation ever.
Right.
Particularly where habits are concerned and so on and so forth. I think newspaper reading is and the trust in newspapers, the credibility. So that's not surprising at all. there has been, there are several data points which tell us, in fact, even BCG has been doing a monitor, which is on, smaller towns versus larger towns kind of situation. Smaller towns, larger towns, rural. I think that, which also tells the same thing, that, essentials like newspapers are very high in the smaller towns, which in this case means non-metro, so I would assume. So there are, so that's nothing new to the high trust index is not something new to talk about. It has taken,
Right.
I think publishers take the changing, the, what we say, the Kendra Mein Pathak concept, which is basically that your reader is at the core of whatever you do, and understanding how the reader is changing and what are their requirements. I mean, today we are not in the business of breaking news, right? But so we have morphed into an information hub, a knowledge hub, so to speak. So that has carried regional print into places, into larger number of homes across, across the years. So that's not something that is surprising to me. What is, in fact, I wanted to pose a different question to the panel here, and such a marketing leaders here. One of the things that I wanted to ask is that if we were to, look at what the subject matter here today is, which is that it's our Nonmetros, really fueling the recovery of in India, and there seems to be some data available now to say that, yeah, there are certain categories where they are looking more resilient and so on and so forth. In this situation, how does the market prioritization model change?
Yes,
so
please.
that's yeah. So how
anyone wants to
market,
take it? Yes.
Market prioritization model change, because one can at this whole traditional market prioritization where the large P1 markets are metros, but now metros are not firing. They will come back, and they will, but at this point in time, you and I are not going to sit there and say we'll wait for the metros to fire, right? We will say that these are the markets that are firing. Go get in there. So what happens to market prioritization? I just wanted to get a word from all of you.
Can I? Okay. See, in terms of market prioritization, as you rightly said, okay, as a sales or a marketing guy, you can't wait for market to wake up, okay. You need to take that optimistic view and say, okay, where is the market working? These are the markets which are working. Okay. What does it take to take that market up? Okay. For example, in the upcountry market or the rural market. So we've been pushing our entire distribution channel, the towns which are open. So at any point of time, at probably around 9 o'clock, we get a clear information, which are the markets open, which are the shops open. So entire our sales team, we have a mapping exercise which we do. So we understand which are the markets which are open, what is going to be closed. Now, what is it working there? Is the print reaching there? Okay. Now, of course, in terms of how do you get the customer? So print is, whichever markets prints are reaching, probably, okay, take that as a priority and then put the print there. Okay, if that market can be doing, we have experimented. For example, we did some experimentation in the upcountry market to see the tier 2 and tier 3, like how a Facebook or a campaign can work. So that we experimented on a particular product in that market to see whether Facebook will work. Okay, that way, okay, some markets we did, like for example, now the Onam is starting. So, okay, in Kerala, touchwood, okay, probably the newsprinters not got affected. So probably to that extent that they've already reached, like you said, about 80-85% they've reached. Okay, move ahead there. Because in TV, there's nothing live happening. So move into print and then try different combinations. Yes, of course. Don't wait for Metro to come up. Whatever
so
money.
Basically, what you're saying, Satish, is go where the sales is, right?
Yes, obviously.
Yeah, so right now, if the sales is in tier 2, tier 3 markets, then go there, I guess. That's what you're saying.
At the end of the day, at the month end, we need to look at the number. So the number, wherever it happens, chase that number there. That's it. I mean, that's what probably we have been prioritizing and moving ahead.
Right, meet the consumer wherever he is, definitely. So I want to come quickly to these. I have some questions, so specific. I quickly want to refer to these questions. My first is to you, Mr. Satish. This question is from Rekha More. As you said before that your industry is back on track. Same happened with regional dailies and non-metro markets. How are you guys making the most of it?
See, definitely. That's why if you see during the lockdown, probably, okay, I mean, without referring to the names, probably in the metro market, we stopped advertising. But in the non-metros, we continued our advertisement in terms of the print. Like I just gave an example of Onam, so we have full-fledged. Even today, we have a full-page ad which has come in Mathrubhumi, you know. So wherever we are seeing an opportunity, whether it is a regional or this one, we've been quite aggressive in that markets to move ahead. So I think
right.
That answers.
Sure. Mr. Rao, for you, the question is, where do you see the education category in the next 1 year? What are your plans to deal with this situation? You know?
Yeah, I have seen that question. We need to understand two important scenarios that are emerging owing to the pandemic as far as education is concerned. We see that initially there was a lot of confusion as to what has to be done, and then quickly institutions have woken up to building their infrastructure and training their faculty members to get on to online connect. So confusion to infrastructure building to the maturity stage of where institutions would win is to create differentiation. The institution was already known for certain USPs. I think that USP should be brought into even in the online mode. I think once the differentiation is achieved, then that would be a maturity stage. Now, within this online adoption, there are again three important phases. One is the first phase has been adopting various tools like Zoom, WhatsApp, Google Meet, or MS Teams, so on and so forth. From tools, some of the institutions have moved to what is called a white label learning management systems, white label LMS. White label LMS is little more than a tool. It gives you certain other functionalities, but that is available in the market and you can put your logo on that and you can run. But institutions which are here for a longer stay and who have a job to protect their reputation will build their own learning management systems. It is like staying in a hotel to staying in a rented house to staying in your own home. That is from tool to white label LMS to your own LMS. It depends on your vision and the power of stay in the industry, the education space that you have been into. And that defines various other actions. So these are the two important scenarios that are emerging. As I foresee, this is going to be a blended learning in the days to come, even after face-to-face learning is opened up. So a large part of the things that we were teaching in the classroom would now be relegated to online, that is asynchronous learning in terms of videos, games, and things like that. But campuses would be very nicely prioritized for peer learning, learning from friends, building camaraderie, bonding, games, sports, so on and so forth. I think we will be using discussions, debates, and all these things for navigating through contrary opinions. And that's what education institutions should be used for. And some of the budget schools or some of those who have not been staying in education with passion will move out. Eventually, they'll be compelled to move out, and the best of them will stay. As far as faculty members are concerned, they have adapted themselves beautifully well, and they become the champion of gathering all the students. They become more discoverable if they use their social media, and then they'll play a role model. They continue to play the role model that they have been playing, and therefore the best of the teachers will become better with these new scenarios emerging. And I think
sorry, I'm really sorry. I have to, just in the interest of time, I want to take one final question, like that typical news channel debate types, like 1 minute to all of you. I'll start with you, Mr. Oberoi, So tell me, as we go on, the sentiment that is there in the non-metro markets, how can brands leverage it? What is your advice to, the marketing community? How do you see it? A quick 1 minute answer.
For them, it's like to reach out if it's specifically for the marketing community, I would say that the themes are changing. Earlier, we used to talk about prosperity, we used to talk about fulfilling dreams, etc. But the themes have changed to a more subdued emotions. Security is an important one. We are coming back down in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So our themes are what we say, the message we say. It's more about security of future, and it is very important for you to reach out. Personal interactions will be limited, but the digital is like now embedded into the life fabric of every citizen of India almost. And the important thing is, yes, stay connected.
Right. Mrs. Satish, your quick answer to this.
My advice to anybody in marketing or sales is probably, as I said again, I'll repeat. One is the pre-purchase behavior has completely changed. The process of purchase has changed, and then the post-purchase has completely changed. Now, as a marketer, you need to clearly study what is this behavior changes which is happening, whichever product, whatever categories we are in. How do we reach to these three changes which we have done? And then probably adapting to the new digital. When I say digital, it's not about e-commerce alone. It's about the way the information you will reach to consumer and the medium which we will use it to reach that consumer. I think that will completely change. And I think as a sales and a marketing person, faster we adapt to this one, I think better would be for everybody.
Mr. Rao, quickly, then I go to Ms. Sethi the last final word.
I think this newfound situation has dawned what is called minimalism. Minimalism helps us identify the real needs from those loosely drawn Venn diagram kind of needs that we have been marketing on in the past. I think those products and services that can be taken inside the living room through access to customer, through retention of customer, and through engagement of the customer, I think those products and services will survive. And for us, we will forever learn to live a life that is frugal and more efficient. And marketers and businesses will also turn adaptively more efficient and more faster and reach out to the customers accordingly. One point before I close is that once one person has asked the question, the new education policy will definitely have FDIs coming into education, and more good foreign institutions are going to set up in India in the years to come. My answer is yes to that.
Perfect. Ms. Sethi, slightly tweaked question to you is that how can brands make most of this situation as you're seeing this sentiment? How can they leverage this?
I just want to say a couple of things. First of all, as far as, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, all the various tiers of markets that we talked about, unmetro markets that we talked about, or non-metro markets that we talked about, there is a misconception in terms of what percentage contribution they bring to the table in terms of various categories. From the data that we understand, almost 60 to 65% contribution across certain very large categories markets. The faster they are, they are merged into the fabric, the larger marketing fabric, so to speak, I think the better it will be. I think we as marketers need to understand that. Second is that in terms of regional publications, they continue to be, the numbers are out there, as Satish was also mentioning. So those continue to do well. It's that is back. The amalgamation of reading both offline and online between the physical and the digital avatars is something that we are seeing in the non-metro markets in a spectacular way. As a company, we continue to do a lot of work in the product area so that you're able to continue to be to your franchise. I think that's important. And I am a great, personally, I'm a great proponent of the fact that we need to continuously look at, which is the last question that I had to all of you, which is market prioritization. And how do we, if this is the situation, then what do we need to do in this situation? Do we take note of the fact that there is a paradigm shift and therefore change our thinking? Or do we wait for, do wait.
Right.
I think that is a, and I'm sure that we won't, because I think venue. So that is these are interesting times, and I think we are all responding in very, very interesting ways. Satish, I totally loved the way you described.
And that is very interesting, actually. And the time bound, I mean, to do it is so fast.
So much for allowing that extra time to speak.
I want to thank Ms. Sethi, Mr. Oberoi, Mr. Satish, Mr. Rao for this wonderful conversation. And our focus, along with our partner Dainik Bhaskar, would remain on non-metros. We'll come up with a series of, as I said, webinars. And for today, thank you so much for joining us, to all the viewers who watched us and all the questions that were posted. Thank you once again for your time. See you soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks to the chair.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.